don't know why I saved it off at first, but as soon as some friends saw it, they said, "Oh, you look younger." But that was it.
This is a man whose voice has symbolized control, wisdom, and calm for decades. So when people saw him tense, shaken, and visibly rattled, it wasn't acting and it wasn't for cameras. This wasn't scripted emotion or staged drama. This was real pressure finally breaking through, and everyone could feel it. What unfolded during that sudden appearance was a man watching a nightmare he'd been carrying in silence finally surface after days of strain. The story surrounding Rob Reiner's passing had been wrapped in soft language and careful phrasing, clearly meant to keep things steady. Public statements tried to smooth the shock, but Morgan Freeman refused to play along with that tone. He ripped through the polite packaging and forced people to look at what had been sitting underneath for years. He didn't step forward to comfort anyone or repeat safe sympathy lines. Freeman said the silence around Nick Reiner wasn't accidental, it was intentional. Ignoring warning signs, in his words, isn't neutral behavior, it's involvement, and that's exactly why his message hit so hard. This wasn't just some industry connection either. Freeman and Rob Reiner built a real bond while working on The Bucket List, sharing deep late-night talks where Rob spoke openly about his children. But every single time Nick came up, the energy shifted instantly. The room went cold, the mood flipped, and everyone felt it. Freeman said he noticed it immediately, like a switch being pulled. People forget his entire career is built on reading people, on catching silence, tension, and what never gets said out loud. What he revealed about the Reiner household flipped the whole narrative. Everyone thought they understood the situation, but they didn't. At one point, Freeman stopped mid-sentence, stepped back from the mic, and looked visibly shaken before saying, "We all saw the cracks, and we all handed Rob the glue to fix them, knowing it wouldn't hold." That single line sent shockwaves through the room. While headlines kept chasing investigation details and shots outside the Brentwood property, Freeman went deeper. He talked about patterns, pressure, and years of quiet enabling that stacked up over time. This wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, ignored slide downward that nobody wanted to confront. Then he revealed a private moment from 3 years earlier, never reported before. A closed-door dinner, insiders only. Nick showed up unannounced, and Freeman said the air got heavy instantly. Rob Reiner, usually the loudest voice in the room, folded in on himself, shrank, and spoke barely above a whisper. His posture changed, and that's when it clicked. For Freeman, that moment shattered everything. A man seen as untouchable in Hollywood was actually scared inside his own family. That truth changed how Freeman saw the entire situation from that point forward. His words stopped sounding like commentary and started sounding like a warning that came way too late. What Freeman shared next wasn't meant for public ears at all. He revealed that Rob Reiner called him just weeks before everything collapsed, and this wasn't a casual check-in. It was a late-night call filled with fear, confusion, and long, heavy pauses. Rob kept circling one subject, asking hypothetical questions that weren't hypothetical at all. Questions about boundaries, about when love becomes risky, about whether it's ever right to shut the door on your own child. That kind of talk doesn't come from comfort, it comes from desperation, and Freeman knew it. Freeman admitted he told Rob to focus on keeping Michelle safe and to finally put space between himself and the chaos. But he could tell Rob wasn't built that way. His compassion, the same trait that made his films powerful, was also his weakness, and it kept pulling him back in. Freeman made it clear that Nick understood this dynamic perfectly. He knew exactly which emotional buttons to press and when. That's why Freeman shut down the idea that this was a sudden snap or random spiral. He pushed back hard on that clean, easy narrative because it's comfortable, not because it's true. According to Freeman, this wasn't confusion at all. It was calculation, and he chose that word very carefully. Nick knew that house like muscle memory. He knew the routines, the timing, and the emotional pressure points. Freeman explained that if Nick acted vulnerable, his mother would respond with comfort. If things escalated, Rob would try to fix it with support instead of firm boundaries. Freeman didn't say this lightly, but he made it clear that kindness slowly turned into a tool used against them. As hard as it sounds, Freeman stressed that Rob and Michelle weren't reckless people. They were decent, loving parents trapped in an impossible situation, believing compassion could calm something that was already unstable. Then Freeman shifted to that final night, and this is where his account broke away from the official summaries. While reports relied on cold, technical language, Freeman said what he heard from people close to the situation painted a far more unsettling picture. He pointed out one detail that froze the room instantly. There were no clear warning signs. Rob trusted his son, and that changes everything. No struggle doesn't mean agreement, it means trust. It means Rob didn't believe, even in those final moments, that his child would truly cross that line. Freeman's voice slipped when he explained what that really meant. Rob wasn't facing a stranger or a threat, he was facing someone he still believed in. This is the story of a father who refused to believe the worst until believing became impossible. Hollywood usually smooths stories like this over, where details blur, questions fade, and silence quietly takes over. It's cleaner that way, less messy, less uncomfortable. But Freeman made it clear that silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. Preserving a polished legacy wasn't his priority, not now. In Freeman's view, the only real way to respect Rob Reiner was to stop protecting the lies surrounding Nick Reiner. Beneath Freeman's calm delivery, there was unmistakable anger sitting just below the surface. He wasn't talking about Nick either. He was calling out the entire system that kept cushioning him. Freeman openly criticized the friends who kept slipping Nick money after Rob finally drew a hard line. Freeman called out industry connections that kept reopening doors that should have stayed shut. Second chances were handed out not because Nick earned them, but because of the last name he carried. At one point, Freeman didn't soften his words at all. He said, "We created something dangerous by feeding it, and then we left Rob and Michelle alone to deal with the consequences." That wasn't frustration, that was a direct accusation aimed straight at a massive social circle, and he made sure it landed. And this wasn't some confused teenager being misunderstood. Nick was a grown man with access to elite recovery programs, top-tier therapy, financial safety nets, and career chances most people never even touch. Freeman made a point to call out the double standard already forming in public opinion. He said he knows exactly how the defense narrative usually goes. Claims about impaired judgment, reduced responsibility, soft explanations meant to blur accountability. Freeman didn't wait for a courtroom to react, though. He shut that angle down immediately. According to Freeman, there was nothing unclear about Nick's mindset. He acknowledged that Nick struggled with substance-related issues earlier in life and spent time in treatment programs. But Freeman made one thing absolutely clear, and he didn't hesitate saying it. When Freeman interacted with Nick personally, he described him as aware, deliberate, and emotionally manipulative. Coming from someone with Freeman's credibility, those words land heavy. This wasn't rumor talk or second-hand chatter, it was first-hand assessment from someone the public trusts. With that, Freeman placed himself front and center before any trial even begins, and the impact is already spreading fast. His words reshaped the conversation in real time, before excuses could fully settle. Meanwhile, others close to Rob, including Billy Crystal and Tom Cruise, have gone completely silent. That silence feels loud, not because of disagreement, but because Freeman went further than anyone expected. He cut through spiraling rumors before they got uglier, stopping whispers that tried to shift blame or twist the story.
You know, if you read an outstanding script, that's as far as it goes. After that, it has to do with who you're going to work with, who's going to be the cinematographer, who's going to direct it, and how well you handle yourself.
Freeman tackled those accusations head-on with zero hesitation. He described the Reiner household as warm, stable, and filled with genuine love. When he spoke about Michelle Singer Reiner, his tone shifted completely. It was steady, respectful, and protective. He painted Michelle as someone who spent years holding the family together, choosing patience and hope every single time. In Freeman's telling, there was no darkness inside that home until it was brought in from the outside. That distinction mattered, and he made sure people understood it. He framed the situation as a peaceful space disrupted by a destructive presence. This wasn't a family failure in his eyes. It was an intrusion that overwhelmed even a strong foundation. Freeman was very intentional about how this should be remembered. Then he dropped one detail that snapped everyone's attention instantly. He mentioned a script. Rob had been quietly working on a deeply personal project. Freeman didn't give details, but he hinted enough for people to connect the dots. Nick may had discovered it before everything collapsed. If Nick saw himself in those pages, not as a hero but as a warning, that realization could have hit hard. Freeman didn't say it directly, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Truth on paper cuts deeper than any confrontation. Freeman wasn't chasing shock or attention, he was trying to lock the narrative in place before it got twisted beyond recognition. In his view, the truth was already painful enough without being rewritten. He described Rob as someone finally putting his real life onto the page. Freeman made it clear that honesty becomes dangerous when it enters a space built on denial. Truth doesn't sit quietly where lies have been allowed to grow, and he stressed that timing mattered. Freeman revealed he spoke with Michelle just 2 days before everything collapsed. She didn't sound panicked or afraid, just worn down in a way that only comes from years of constant tension. She mentioned Nick planned to stop by for the holidays, one more attempt to reset things. Freeman said that instantly made him uneasy. He urged her to meet somewhere public, somewhere neutral. He warned her not to bring that energy back into the home, because once it crossed that threshold, there was no controlling what followed. He called that house a place of peace, something sacred, and carrying that conversation afterward clearly weighed heavy on him. That's why Freeman looked so broken during his statement. What people saw wasn't anger anymore, it was guilt, real survivor's guilt. He's replaying everything in his head, questioning every move, wondering if he should have shown up, made another call, pushed harder, stepped in sooner before it was too late. Reality hits different when the noise finally stops. Rob Reiner wasn't just a filmmaker, he was comfort for generations. His work brought warmth, laughter, and connection. When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride weren't just movies, they were emotional anchors. Knowing someone who gave that much joy faced such a cold ending creates a clash that's hard to sit with. Freeman is trying to bridge that gap for people. He said the man audiences loved was real, but Rob's private world carried far more weight than anything that ever reached the screen. Fame didn't protect him, money didn't fix instability. Freeman tore down the illusion that power equals safety. Pain doesn't care about status, loss doesn't negotiate. And then Freeman turned back to Nick, and this is where he didn't hold back at all. He described someone who moved through life expecting doors to open, believing entitlement came with the last name. Entitlement shows up in privileged circles all the time, but Freeman made it clear this went way beyond arrogance. He called it corrosive, something that eats away at everything around it. He recalled a moment on a film set where Nick snapped at a production assistant over something small and the situation exploded fast. What stuck with Freeman wasn't just the outburst, but what happened next. Rob Reiner stepped in, not to defend his son, but to apologize for him. Picture that, a respected Hollywood legend apologizing because his adult son couldn't control himself. Freeman said Rob looked embarrassed, drained, and smaller somehow, and that image never left him. That moment wasn't the beginning, and it wasn't the end either. Freeman said the pattern only kept getting worse. Disrespect turned into financial pressure turned into emotional strain. Emotional strain slowly crossed into something far more destructive. Freeman wanted people to understand this didn't happen overnight. It unfolded slowly, predictably, and tragically.
every ignored moment stacked on the last, every compromise pushed the line farther back. That's why this isn't just another headline for Freeman. It's a memorial to a family dynamic worn down from the inside. A warning about what happens when love keeps stepping forward while boundaries keep stepping back. And the most painful truth of all is this: everyone involved thought there was still time. At the heart of everything Freeman shared, there's one thing he's openly grieving: not just losing a friend, but watching hope collapse in real time. Freeman said Rob Reiner's greatest weakness was the same thing that defined him as a father. Rob never stopped believing the son he raised would come back. He held on to the idea that the person standing in front of him was temporary, that the anger, entitlement, and volatility were just phases that would pass. Freeman framed this as a quiet warning to every parent listening. At what point does hope stop being love and start becoming danger? Freeman said that line was crossed long before anyone wanted to admit it. Parental love distorts reality. You don't see a threat, you see potential. You see memories. You see who your child used to be. Freeman's choice to speak out isn't just emotional, it's serious. His description of Nick as aware, intentional, and manipulative directly challenges any attempt to rewrite the story. That alone changes everything. Freeman wasn't speculating, and he made that crystal clear. He didn't say maybe. He didn't say it felt like something was off. He said he was there. He said Nick was loved. He said support never stopped. And most importantly, he made it clear responsibility never was missing. That alone puts any defense strategy in a tight corner. Freeman didn't whisper accusations, he stated them plainly. A voice trusted for decades doesn't get brushed aside easily, especially not by a jury. And what stood out just as much was what Freeman didn't ask for. He didn't ask for privacy, he didn't push silence, he didn't tell people to move on. Instead, he urged the public to stop skimming headlines and start looking at patterns. Freeman understands how influence bends outcomes. He openly acknowledged that powerful families often face softened consequences instead of real accountability, and he made it clear he won't let this story quietly fade away. This isn't revenge, it's resolve. Freeman didn't just lose a colleague, he lost a friend, someone he spent long days on set, laughing about life and aging together. Those memories are now permanently changed, and he's not backing down from them. Beneath everything he said, there was a sharp sense of betrayal, not just personal betrayal, but institutional betrayal too. Freeman hinted that people in the industry knew Nick was unstable and chose silence anyway. There were incidents at private events, arguments, aggressive behavior brushed off to avoid embarrassment. That silence didn't protect anyone, it only made the fallout inevitable. Freeman suggested that protecting reputations slowly became more important than stepping in. Rob's image was guarded more closely than safety itself, and in trying to avoid damage, the system may have locked in the very outcome it feared. He pointed to moments years earlier where real action could have changed everything. If accountability had landed, if consequences were real, this story might look very different today. Instead, behavior was managed, not confronted, and patterns were ignored. Good intentions don't erase real-world outcomes. Sometimes they make them worse. And Freeman left a chilling thought hanging in the air. Does Nick realize how completely the story has shifted? Does he understand that one of the most trusted voices alive has just reshaped the narrative for good? Freeman's words carry more weight than endless speculation ever could. When he said there's no forgiveness left in this story, it didn't sound emotional, it sounded final.
But when he spoke about Michelle, his tone softened instantly. He described her as the foundation, the bridge, the one holding everything together for as long as humanly possible. Her absence sat heavy in every sentence. Freeman made sure the world remembers her not as a footnote, but as the heart of a family that tried until there was nothing left to give. Michelle was the balance, the center, the reason that household kept functioning at all. The fact that she was also lost in this collapse made the situation impossible to rationalize in Freeman's eyes. He made it clear that crossing that line erased any remaining space for sympathy. Anger or chaos might explain one act, but not both. Freeman said that kind of turn requires something colder, something detached. He admitted he's only seen that level of emotional emptiness when studying the darkest characters of his career. At that point, his tone hardened. This wasn't grief anymore. It was clarity. Freeman was drawing a hard line between dysfunction and something far more deliberate. The interview ended with a moment that froze the room completely. The reporter asked a simple question: how should Rob Reiner be remembered? Most expected talk about films or legacy, but Freeman went somewhere else entirely. He paused, stared ahead, eyes heavy but steady, and said he wanted Rob remembered as a man who loved without limits. Then he added something that hit like a final verdict. He said he wanted Nick remembered as someone who never learned how to love at all. That contrast landed hard. It wasn't shaped for headlines. It was raw, stripped of fame, status, and distraction. In one sentence, Freeman reframed the entire story as deeply human and deeply broken. This stopped being a celebrity story right there. It became about family, about connection collapsing when love keeps reaching out and never comes back. Now the tragedy has shifted phases. Shock is fading, numbness is lifting, anger is taking its place. Freeman didn't create that anger, he gave it direction, and that focus is aimed squarely at Nick Reiner and the system that let this go on for years. The silence, the excuses, the protection dressed up as compassion. Freeman made it clear that what comes next won't be quiet at all. A case like this won't stay sealed behind gates or NDAs. It's going to rip through private circles and public reputations fast. Stories buried in quiet neighborhoods and closed-door rooms are about to surface. By speaking first, Freeman sent a loud message. The wall of silence is cracking. People sitting on information don't have to stay quiet anymore. Once one voice breaks through, others follow, and they will. Old incidents will be revisited, rumors re-examined, patterns seen for what they really were. The carefully protected image of the Reiner family is coming apart piece by piece. What's left won't be neat or flattering. It'll be the truth of two people who believed love could still fix what was already unraveling. This isn't gossip or spectacle. It's a real-life tragedy unfolding in real time. Freeman even hinted at the irony. Rob Reiner understood stories, structure, warning signs. Unresolved tension doesn't vanish, it escalates. Freeman suggested Rob may have felt where this was heading all along. That's the most haunting part of all, the idea that someone who understood stories so deeply may have seen the ending coming, yet still believed it could change. Freeman's heartbreak comes from knowing he couldn't stop it. He couldn't rewrite the final act. All he can do now is tell the truth about what remains. And what's left is heavy, uncomfortable, but necessary. Freeman made it clear that looking away only guarantees this kind of tragedy repeats itself somewhere else. Silence didn't protect anyone here, and truth, no matter how painful, is all that's left standing. If something like this can happen inside a guarded Los Angeles neighborhood surrounded by wealth and opportunity, it forces a brutal reality into the open. Money and status don't shield families when something inside is already breaking. When Freeman finally stepped away from the cameras, he did it alone. No handlers, no crowd, just a man carrying a truth heavier than anything he's ever said on screen. He looked older, not from age, but from loss. This kind of ending doesn't just hurt, it strips away certainty itself. It shakes everything you think you understand about how the world is supposed to work. Watching someone as steady as Morgan Freeman visibly lose that belief was unsettling for everyone who saw it. The legal process will move forward in January. Dates will be set, arguments will fly, but in the court of public opinion, the line is already drawn. Freeman's words didn't sound like commentary. They landed like a verdict delivered with painful clarity. Nick Reiner isn't being judged only for what he did, but for what he destroyed: a family, decades of trust, and the most basic bond between parent and child. Because one of the most respected voices alive spoke plainly, this story won't be softened or forgotten. This isn't about celebrity
celebrity anymore. It's about boundaries ignored, warnings dismissed, and love pushed past its breaking point. Freeman didn't speak to shock anyone. He spoke so the truth couldn't be reshaped later. Stories like this matter because they force conversations people avoid, and that's why we'll keep breaking this down piece by piece. If you want to stay updated, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear how this hit you. And check out the next video on your screen right now because more details are already unfolding.